"I'll pay for the shirt," she blurted before she could stop herself. Her hands trembled, napkins spilling from her bag, coffee dripping down his chest. The man didn't flinch. He simply handed his empty cup to the driver beside him and began unbuttoning his stained shirt with calm, deliberate movements. He had that quiet kind of authority that didn't need to raise its voice. "I'll replace it," she said again, mortified. "Or dry cleaning, whatever." He looked up then, and for a heartbeat, she forgot how to breathe. "Are you always this dramatic before breakfast?" he asked, voice low, smooth, and a little amused. No," she stammered. "Only when I ruin someone's morning." She tried to smile, but her nerves got the better of her. "Actually, could you? This is crazy, but could you pretend to be my boyfriend tonight?" He blinked once. "Excuse me. I'll pay you," she rushed out. "It's my dad's 60th. My family's complicated. They think I'm dating someone successful, and if I show up alone, he'll be humiliated. He worked so hard to throw this party, and her voice cracked. "Please, just tonight." The man's jaw tightened, the corners of his mouth almost curving. "You're serious? Dead serious?" He studied her for a long moment, something unreadable passing behind those cool gray eyes. Then, finally, he buttoned his jacket again and said, "Keep your money." She blinked. "You'll do it." "In your words," he said, adjusting his cufflinks. "Just for tonight." The villa gleamed like a dream from an old Hollywood film. Soft jazz, golden chandeliers, and the illusion of wealth in every corner. When Hannah Brooks walked in on Ethan Cole's arm, the conversations around them faltered. Heads turned. Even her mother's carefully neutral smile slipped into surprise. "At least you're not alone," her mother murmured, air-kissing her cheek. "He looks respectable." "Everyone," Hannah said, managing a smile. "This is Ethan, my boyfriend." The word boyfriend felt strange on her tongue, but Ethan didn't miss a beat. He shook hands, answered questions smoothly, and when her Uncle David started grilling him about the markets, Ethan smiled politely. "Finance is less about risk," he said, "and more about knowing when to walk away." David blinked, caught off guard. Spoken like a man who's already won. Ethan only smiled, the kind that said, "Maybe I have." Hannah tried to keep her composure, but she couldn't help noticing how easily he fit in, how he moved, spoke, charmed, and protected her without overstepping. Every gesture seemed effortless, every word carefully measured. "You're good at this," she whispered later, near the dessert table. He leaned closer. "You think this is my first fake date?" She raised an eyebrow. "Is it?" He didn't answer, just smiled. Then, the first notes of "At Last" filled the air. "Oh no," she groaned. "My mom told the band to play this. She thinks a man's worth is proven if he dances without being asked." Ethan chuckled softly. "Then we shouldn't disappoint her." He took her hand before she could protest. The crowd parted as they stepped onto the dance floor. Candlelight shimmered around them. "I don't usually agree to strangers' requests," he murmured as they swayed. "Lucky me," she said. He shook his head gently. "No, lucky me." Her pulse tripped. For a moment, the noise faded. It felt real. Then a small cry cut through the music. A little girl, her niece, had tripped near the edge of the dance floor. Before Hannah could move, Ethan was already kneeling beside her. "Hey," he said softly, offering a handkerchief. "You're okay. Brave girls don't cry over tiny scratches. You're tougher than that." The girl sniffled, then nodded. He smiled and bowed playfully. "See? Good as new." The guests watched, murmuring with quiet admiration. Her father's eyes softened for the first time all night, and Hannah just stood there, stunned. Because this wasn't a performance. Not when he danced with her. Not when he comforted her niece. Not when he looked at her like he'd known her far longer than an hour. The jazz picked up again. Laughter rippled through the villa. But inside Hannah, something unfamiliar took root. Something warm, steady, dangerous. Maybe pretending wasn't pretending anymore. The room shimmered with golden light as champagne glasses clinked beneath the chandeliers. The jazz band's mellow rhythm wrapped around conversations like silk, smoothing over the tension that often hid beneath polite smiles. Everything looked perfect, too perfect, until David Brooks stopped moving. He stood near the fireplace, his glass of scotch hovering halfway to his lips, eyes narrowing on something across the room. A small glint, a flicker of silver under the chandelier. His brows drew tight. Then he began to walk. Hannah didn't notice right away. Her pulse was still unsteady from the dance, from the way Ethan's voice had brushed her ear when he whispered those words. But David's voice, sharp and cutting through the jazz, froze the entire room. "Where did you get those cufflinks?" The crowd stilled. Every head turned. Ethan followed the direction of David's stare, then calmly glanced down at his wrist. The silver cufflinks gleamed faintly, a sleek, modern design, subtle but unmistakable to anyone who'd ever sat in a boardroom at Cole Industries. Hannah frowned, confused. David took another step, his voice tightening. "Those were limited edition, issued only to senior partners at Cole Industries. There were 20 sets made." He paused, his tone rising. "So tell me, are you?" A ripple of tension spread through the room. Ethan straightened, meeting David's eyes with quiet calm. "Yes." Hannah's heart stumbled. "What is he talking about?" she asked. David's scotch slammed down onto the side table with a crack. "He's not some finance consultant, Hannah. He's Ethan Cole, the man who dismantled my company last year. Hostile buyout, layoffs, everything. You brought him here." Gasps swept through the guests like wind through dry leaves. Murmurs rose behind champagne flutes. Faces turned. Hannah could barely breathe. "Ethan, is that true?" she whispered. Her mother was suddenly beside her, clutching her arm. "We need to talk. Now." Walter Brooks arrived seconds later, face pale, voice trembling with anger. "Is this true?" he demanded. "You brought him here, tonight, of all nights?" "I didn't know," Hannah said, shaking her head, voice cracking. Walter's jaw tightened. "Are you in love with the man who cost your uncle everything?" The question hit like a slap. She couldn't answer. Ethan stood a few feet away, quiet, composed, offering no defense. The silence burned. Hannah's pulse thundered in her ears. She pushed past the watching crowd, grabbed Ethan's sleeve, and hissed, "Come with me." She pulled him down the corridor, past gold-framed portraits and flickering candles, until they reached the terrace. The city glittered below, distant and indifferent. The cool air bit against her skin as she turned to face him. "Tell me the truth," she said, her voice shaking. "Why didn't you tell me who you were?" Ethan's gaze held hers, steady, unreadable. "I didn't lie," he said softly. "You never asked." "That's not an answer." "I wasn't hiding," he said. "I just didn't want that to be the reason you looked at me." Hannah blinked, fighting tears. "Then why did you say yes? Why help me at all?" He was silent for a moment, the sound of the wind stirring the leaves. "Because I recognized you." She frowned. "Recognized me?" He didn't explain. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulling out a worn black wallet. From it, he unfolded a small, faded square of ivory fabric, edges frayed, a tiny pink heart stitched into one corner. Hannah froze. "This," he said quietly, "is yours." She stared at it, unable to speak. 10 years ago, he began, I was 17. Stupid. Angry. I'd stolen my brother's bike, riding through the west side in the rain. Lost control, crashed hard. My leg was pinned. Blood everywhere. People passed by. No one stopped. His voice dropped lower. "Until you did." Hannah's breath caught. Faint flashes surfaced, a night soaked in rain, a stranger bleeding on the sidewalk, her teenage hands trembling as she tore the hem of her shirt to stop the bleeding. "You were wearing an oversized hoodie," he said. "Hair in a loose braid. You knelt beside me, said nothing, just helped. You cleaned the blood with this handkerchief. Then you left before I could thank you." Her throat tightened. That old sewing project, the pink heart, she'd kept it for years before losing it one stormy night. "I kept it," Ethan said, his voice breaking just enough for her to hear the truth. "Through college, through every deal, every flight. When I built my company, I carried it in my jacket. A reminder." He touched the left side of his chest. "Close to my heart." Hannah reached for the handkerchief, her fingers trembling. "You knew all this time?" He nodded. "Why didn't you tell me?" His voice softened. "Because I didn't want it to be a story people judged or twisted. I didn't want what you did, what that moment meant, to become a weapon in that room." Her eyes filled with tears. "I barely remembered it," she whispered. "It changed me," he said. "You changed me. That night made me believe in something again. That someone could care without wanting anything in return." The air between them was still, heavy with something sacred. Hannah pressed the handkerchief to her chest, her breath unsteady. "You saved me, too," she whispered, surprising herself. "Tonight, you did." Ethan didn't speak. He only looked at her, eyes full of everything he hadn't said. Inside the villa, the warmth had vanished. The party had turned brittle, whispers replacing music, judgment replacing laughter. When Hannah finally walked back in, she felt every stare like a weight on her shoulders. Her mother met her at the door, voice sharp but shaking. "You humiliated your father," she hissed. Walter appeared behind her, eyes red with anger and pride. "You brought the man who ruined your uncle to my house. What were you thinking?" Hannah swallowed hard. "I wasn't," she admitted. "But I'm not ashamed of him." Her mother gasped. Walter turned away, unable to look at her. "Go upstairs," he said quietly. She went. In the guest room, the silence was almost kind. She shut the door, exhaled shakily, and leaned against it. Then she saw it. A gray coat draped over the chair. On top, a folded piece of paper. Her heart pounded as she opened it. The handwriting was clean, deliberate. "The backyard's getting cold." Her breath caught. She looked toward the window, where the garden lanterns still glowed faintly through the glass. And for the first time that night, she didn't hesitate. The ballroom shimmered beneath crystal chandeliers, alive with soft jazz and the muted clinking of champagne flutes. Wealth and power dressed in designer suits and polished smiles filled the air like perfume. But Hannah Brooks stood near the back, quiet, still, her modest navy dress a shade of calm in the ocean of extravagance. She hadn't planned to come tonight. She'd nearly turned around twice before walking through the hotel doors. But something in her heart, a whisper, a pull, had said go. Just go. She hadn't expected to see him. She wasn't sure she even wanted to. The host stepped up to the microphone. The crowd settled instantly. "Good evening, everyone. Tonight, we're proud to announce a project that reflects our company's evolving mission. Not just building success, but rebuilding lives." A wave of polite murmurs ran through the room. "This year," the host continued, "Brooks Industries will launch a scholarship program for the children of our former factory workers, those affected by our past restructuring. This $500,000 fund was made possible by an anonymous donor. When asked what to name it, they said only, name it after someone who once forgave." A hush rippled across the hall. And then she saw him. Ethan Cole stood quietly at the far end of the room. No tuxedo, no tie, just a simple black suit and that same calm steadiness that once unraveled her. His hands rested in his pockets. His eyes, gentle, searching, found hers through the golden light. Hannah's chest tightened. She hadn't seen him in months. Not since that night. The host cleared his throat again. "At this time, we invite Ms. Hannah Brooks to share a few words. Her connection to both the company and this cause makes her voice the one we need to hear tonight." The world seemed to tilt. Eyes turned toward her. Hannah blinked, startled. Then, slowly, she stepped forward. No speech, no plan, just the steady thrum of her heartbeat as she climbed the steps to the podium. The microphone hummed softly. "I wasn't prepared for this," she began. A few polite chuckles drifted through the room. She took a breath, steadying herself. But maybe that's fitting, because life doesn't really prepare you for the moments that change you. She paused. Her gaze flicked toward Ethan. He didn't look away. "When I was younger," she continued, "I believed that strength meant control, knowing every step, planning every move. But life doesn't care about plans. It humbles you. It makes you lose what you thought you needed, so you can find what truly matters." Her father, Walter Brooks, watched from the front row, arms crossed, unreadable. "Years ago," Hannah said softly, "someone taught me something I didn't understand until recently. He said real kindness doesn't need witnesses. It's quiet. It's remembering small things when no one's watching." A flash of memory rose, a coat folded neatly on her chair, a small mint chocolate tucked into the pocket. Her favorite. He had remembered. She blinked away the sting in her eyes. "I used to think forgiveness was about letting someone else off the hook," she continued. "But it's not. It's about freeing yourself from who you were when you were hurt. It's about starting over, not because you forgot, but because you remember and still choose grace." The room was silent. Tonight's scholarship, it's not just charity. It's a chance to begin again. For families, for this company, for all of us. She looked toward her father, then back at Ethan. "And I think we all need that chance sometimes." Applause rose, soft at first, then building, warm and genuine. Hannah stepped back, exhaling shakily. When she returned to her seat, she didn't see Ethan immediately. But when she glanced toward the far corner again, he was gone. Only a folded handkerchief rested on the seat she passed by. Crisp, clean, familiar. Her breath caught. She reached down and picked it up. The initials EC were stitched in the corner, just like before. Her chest ached with a memory she could never quite let go of. That night came back to her in flashes. The way he had stepped back under the garden lights, saying softly, "You don't owe me anything, Hannah. But if someday you want to find me again, you'll know where to start." And she had watched him walk away. For days after, she disappeared. She didn't call work, didn't answer messages. The city kept moving while she unraveled in silence. On the third day, she found herself walking with no purpose, through streets she hadn't seen since she was a teenager. The cracked sidewalks of her old neighborhood greeted her like an old song. The smell of bread still drifted from the bakery on 16th and Pine. She sat down on the bus stop bench, the same one she had waited at after school all those years ago. Pulling out her phone, she opened her photo gallery. Among the images from the gala, there was a short video clip she'd forgotten to delete, just a few seconds long. The lighting was uneven, the focus off. But there she was, laughing with her aunt, turning to greet a cousin. And behind her, just in the corner, was Ethan. He reached out and brushed a crumb off her shoulder, careful not to disturb her. He didn't know the camera was recording. His expression wasn't the polished charm she'd seen at events. It was quiet warmth, tenderness, without performance. Hannah froze. Her breath hitched. He had looked at her that way all night, and she hadn't noticed. The clip ended. Her reflection filled the screen, eyes wet with understanding. "He's liked me for a long time," she whispered. "I just couldn't see it." She reached into her coat pocket. The handkerchief was still there, folded neatly, the one he'd given her that night. She pressed it to her lips. For 10 years, he had kept it. For 10 years, he had remembered. And she had forgotten. Tears burned her eyes. "I remember now," she whispered. "And I won't forget again." As the sun dipped lower, Hannah rose from the bench. Her steps turned steady, her heart finally clear. This wasn't about family pride, or money, or the life she was supposed to live. It was about something real, the quiet kind of love that never asks for recognition, the kind that waits, endures, and forgives. And somewhere out there, she knew, Ethan Cole was waiting. Not as a man to be chased or a story to be finished, but as the truth she had finally learned to see. When Hannah looked out over the sea of polished faces, the air thick with the scent of champagne and expectation, her pulse quickened. Then her gaze found him, Ethan Cole, standing quietly at the back of the room. No applause, no expression, just calm, steady presence. Something inside her steadied in return. "When I was little," she began, her voice soft but clear, "my father used to tell me that people always remember the hurt others cause, but rarely the kindness they once received." She paused, her eyes finding her father near the front. Walter Brooks sat perfectly still, his hands folded, his expression breaking ever so slightly. "But that's not right," she said, her tone growing stronger. "Or at least, it shouldn't be." The crowd stilled. The hum of conversation faded. "The real danger," Hannah continued, "isn't the person who cost you money or the one who disagreed with you. The real danger begins when we start believing that money means more than people. When we forget the quiet moments of grace, the times we were helped, forgiven, loved, even when we didn't deserve it." Her voice carried through the golden light of the ballroom, filling every corner of the silence that followed. She looked back at Ethan. He hadn't moved, but the faintest flicker of warmth crossed his face. Pride, gratitude, something deeper. "The true loss," Hannah said softly, "isn't in what we lose. It's when we forget the good someone once gave us." The silence deepened. No coughs, no whispers, only the sound of one truth that had finally found its way home. Hannah stepped back from the microphone, her hands trembling slightly. She drew in a steadying breath as she descended the stairs. Her father rose slowly to his feet, a tear escaping despite the pride in his eyes. Across the room, Ethan gave her a single nod, not of victory, but quiet understanding. A year later, the building stood on a quiet corner of the city, small, sturdy, and full of life. Its brick walls were aged but proud, its signs simple and honest, the Hannah Brooks Foundation. Every time Hannah saw those words, her heart fluttered with disbelief. The place wasn't fancy, but it was alive. Laughter in the halls, startup dreams in motion, hands building second chances from broken beginnings. This was Start Again, a community center she and Ethan had built for people who needed one more try. Small business owners, single parents, dreamers who had once been told they'd never make it. Ethan's name wasn't on the door. He'd insisted on that. This place, he'd said, should carry the name of the one who gave me mine back. That morning, Hannah stood before a group of new faces, her voice steady, her smile effortless. She belonged here, not in glittering ballrooms, but in rooms where hope echoed louder than pride. At the back, Walter Brooks watched quietly. His daughter's words lifted across the hall, and his eyes softened. She never needed rescuing, he murmured. Just someone who believed in her enough not to walk away. After the workshop ended, Hannah returned to her office to find a small note on her desk. Just one line. Don't be late for coffee. Same place. E. Her pulse skipped. The cafe hadn't changed. Same rust-colored awnings, same cinnamon warmth in the air, the same corner table that once held everything unspoken between them. But today, everything felt new. On the table lay an envelope with her name written in Ethan's familiar handwriting. Inside, a note read, "This time, don't walk away so fast." A smile spread slowly across her face. The bell over the door chimed. Ethan stepped in. No designer suit, no cameras, just him. Calm, certain, steady. In his hand, a small wooden box. He walked to her table, eyes never leaving hers, and sat down. "I kept this," he said quietly, opening the box. Inside lay the handkerchief, clean, the edges restitched, and in one corner, delicate embroidery read, "Found you, forever." "I kept it to remind me there's still good in the world," Ethan said. "But this past year, I realized something. The treasure wasn't the memory. It was you. Not the girl who once helped me, but the woman you've become." His voice was steady, but his eyes told the story of every year between them. The waiting, the patience, the love that never demanded. "You showed me what love really is," he said softly. "It's not grand gestures or perfect timing. It's quiet loyalty. It's seeing someone at their worst and choosing to stay. It's remembering the little things, even when no one's looking." He took a slow breath. "Hannah, will you walk beside me, not just for tonight, but for the rest of our lives?" Her throat tightened. Tears filled her eyes, but they didn't fall. Not this time. She reached out, closing his fingers around the handkerchief. "You were never just a chapter in my past," she whispered. "You were the man who remembered me when I forgot myself. The man who loved me without asking for anything back." Her smile trembled, but it was radiant. "And now, I don't want to remember you with just a handkerchief. I want to remember you with a lifetime." Before he could speak, a small voice broke through the warmth between them. "Auntie Hannah." Uncle Ethan dropped his wallet again. A little girl in a pink dress dashed in, waving the wallet triumphantly. Hannah laughed, scooping her up into her arms and planting a kiss on her cheek. "You always show up right when we need you," she said, smiling. Ethan chuckled, ruffling the girl's hair. The cafe filled with easy laughter and the sound of a life finally at peace. Across the room, Walter Brooks sat at a corner table, hands folded around a cup of coffee, his gaze soft. He wasn't watching with pride, but with quiet peace. "She didn't choose the richest man," he said under his breath. "She chose the one who truly saw her, and never let go." If this story touched your heart, if you believe in love that speaks softly, in kindness that doesn't need witnesses, and in second chances that make us whole again, then you already understand what this story was about. Because sometimes all it takes is one quiet act, one steadfast heart, to remind us of the goodness we thought we'd lost, and to believe, once more, in love that lasts.